Alrighty then, we are back for episode number 2. I'm going to find my followers. We are trying to do some part 2 of our civic engagement. So please forgive me. It's been a long day. We had a press release. We also had some other stuff that was going on. What's up, Sharik? I am trying to find everyone else. Is there? There we go. I'm looking for Jasmine. There we go. And there we go. All right. I think I invited everyone. Coolio. I am in Inglewood currently, so I'm not in Lancaster. So forgive me for not being at home. Um, Good to see you, sis. There we go. We back again.
We on a roll.
On a roll.
Are we matching again today?
We matching again? I'm dead. I am dead. Let me see. Okay. We are waiting on a couple other folks, but thank you for everyone that's joining us. Please share, let everyone know what's going on. We're going to start around 30. It has been a long last 24 hours, and we'll talk about that shortly. But Sharik, how's your day going today? Anything new? Anything good happen, or any good news?
Yeah, day is going well. I launched my Kickstarter campaign, my team and I. Let me not just say I, because it was all my team. We launched our Kickstarter for the new documentary series. Hopefully, it will be called "Stop Selling Grandma's House." So,
Awesome. What does that mean? What does that mean?
Stop Selling Grandma's House. It's an exploration of the intersectionality between generational wealth, Black family trauma, racial practices or discrepancies within, real estate within America and in urban communities, and gentrification. Okay. So we're really digging deep into discovery mode and trying to understand what makes Black people sell their legacy home and their family, and how do you keep it. So we're trying to find solutions. So please support, please donate, and go vote.
Absolutely. Right. I think Tanisha on here. You on here?
Hey, yeah, I'm here. Good evening, everyone.
Good evening, my sister. How's your day going? Anything good happening today? What's going on?
Well, it's Indigenous Peoples Day, so it's a beautiful day of remembrance and honoring the land that we're on. I'm coming to y'all from Venice, so LA is on Tongva native land, so definitely appreciative to have this day off, but just been doing reflection, and kind of just been chilling and watching the melee that's going on at City Hall. So I'm ready for the chisme and all the turn up, and really ready to hear if some action comes out of this, and really looking forward to the unity that comes from this. So yeah, I've just been taking in a lot of the things on social media, and also just trying to stay grounded in today being Indigenous Peoples Day.
Love it. Absolutely love that. Absolutely love that. For myself, I know we're waiting on a couple other folks to join us. Thank you everyone for joining, share, tag, whatever you got to do. It has been a long day, but also productive day. We were able to do a press conference in South LA, specifically dealing with the chisme of LA City Council. If you do not know, I want you all to go Google that, and we'll talk about it as time progresses. But there is a lot of chisme and a lot of stuff that's happening, especially with racial superiority or inferiority, racial hierarchy, all kind of stuff that's happening, between Black and brown, but more so it's been spewed by our brown community. So how do we react to it? How do we build from it? And how do we heal from it? And so this is something that we want to talk about while we're dealing with civic engagement. How do we tie that into the whole, knowing who you're electing? People can say something and be about lip service, but their policy says otherwise, their actions say otherwise. And this is something that we want to be very particular about while joining with our millennials and Gen Z. So, shout out to everyone that is following us and is on the page with us. We thank you. We thank you. We thank you. This whole civic engagement is our voice, our vote. and this is really in relations to November elections. Ballots have dropped. Have you guys gotten y'all? Have y'all gotten y'all's?
I ain't checked my mail yet, but I am tonight. So I'm sure I have. They've been calling and texting me. I know that.
See, good. They're on their job then. That's a good
Yeah.
thing.
Yeah. Do you
And
guys
so,
ever answer those calls? Like, do you talk to the people when they? I do. I found myself.
Sometimes when they survey, if I have time,
Yeah.
because I think when I was in school, I learned that when it comes to like surveys, a lot of the folks who have the time to complete the surveys are usually middle class white folks. So I try to do my part and make sure I'm like, I'm black, educated, like make sure I try to, unless I'm in the middle of something, I'll take those surveys
Yeah.
just to make sure, again, our voice is amplified, because even something as small as that, we need to be represented. And I really appreciate the texts, the calls, the emails. Like, they've been emailing, like the ballots are dropping. So I get super excited. They're like, check your mailbox. This has come out. So I'm really inspired by the engagement. And I think that's one of the things that came from, unfortunately, the pandemic, is that they've streamlined a lot of systems and made a lot of things accessible. Well, hopefully for those who have access to internet. So there's another opportunity for accessibility there. But I do like the fact that I feel like I've been more engaged with the voting process by getting these reminders through my email, and it makes me excited. I screenshot it and posted on my IG story, like, I got mine. Did y'all get this email? It's coming through. And I feel like it's the opportunity to call people in instead of call people out. Like, you ain't got your ballot yet? No. Well, did you remind folks? Are you having these conversations? So shout out to whoever's leading that. I know Shirley Weber is the Secretary of State. So I just really shout out to those folks, because it makes me happy. Because I think one thing about folks not voting or not being engaged is I feel like a lot of times we're not meeting people where they're at. It's not necessarily that they don't care about it. I think that a lot of our folks are overburdened when it comes to rent, when it comes to responsibilities, and feeling very unhopeful in, the election process, and not feeling like their voice will make a difference. So I love getting those reminders and just putting that out there and trying as much as possible to bring people in, instead of being on the outside saying, you're not doing your part. If you ain't voting, you can't say nothing. And I try not to be on the negative spectrum of things and try and be very positive about it.
Yeah, I actually got a call from someone from Karen Bass's campaign, and she was like a sis. We sat and had a whole conversation, and I've never done that before, but it was gratifying. I was like, this is great. My voice is being heard, and I asked her questions, so it was pretty dope to do that and feel like an adult having these conversations. Hey, Jazz, how are you?
what's up?
How y'all doing?
Good, real good. How are you?
I'm good. I just happened into the conversation, and you all ladies continue your thought.
No, we're just talking about, the people that are working for the different campaigns and policies. You know how they're calling and sending text messages and stuff. And I was just asking if anyone else actually answers the calls, gets on the phone and speaks with these people, and expresses any of their concerns or asks questions or anything like that. Because I've never done it before. So I figured, why not? I'm a part of the community. It's time that I let myself be heard. And then, they always talk about these polls on the news. Like, where do these polls that they're talking about come from? It comes from people who are communicating. That's how they get their data. So let me be counted as well.
And I think people are scared of those calls because it's scam likely. I don't know if it comes to your phone, but like, if answer, hey, we want to do American research and this and that. It depends on the time of the day, like sometimes I'm in the mood for it, sometimes I'm not. But it's also it's also like, I think Tanisha hit on the point about understanding that middle-aged white people, they get to do it, just freely because either they're retired, they got time, they ain't got to worry about babies, blah, blah. They got all these different stuff that ain't got nothing like our backgrounds do. So, we trying to survive, live on a budget. We trying to commute in traffic, just getting off work at 6:30, and so sometimes those surveys can be overbearing, but realizing that it is very, very necessary. But or even that's just one part of it. But when they call in and asking, to volunteer or to make phone calls or to hit the streets, canvas, for me, that's my part of the cause, is because the campaign is reaching out and they want you to get involved. And so I want to encourage this call. I don't know about you, Jasmine or Tanisha, but like I'm like heavily involved with canvassing right now and phone banking. That's like thing on the week typically, you know. And so yeah, that's where I'm at with it.
Yeah, I'll jump in here. So I don't get any phone calls, thank God, because I'm not going to answer them. But I do get text messages, and I read through them. Typically, I don't answer. But Rick Caruso has been blowing my phone up. So I have replied to his campaign, and they don't say anything that I don't know. They don't say anything that persuades me to change my vote. So it's interesting that it feels very automated. It feels very like impersonable. But I do like phone banking. As you all know, the community doesn't know, and I'm just meeting you, Tanisha. You said you
yes.
Yeah, I'm just meeting you, but I work with Urban League, and we really have a hard-hitting phone bank get off the vote campaign happening in a couple of weeks. So we do really rely on phone banking, and I think it's very important to just have that personal touch when telling people or encouraging people to vote for a certain candidate, because we want to know why we should vote for you. I mean, just like we saw today with the councilwoman saying XYZ about someone, it was one person in that conversation that I actually considered voting for in the primary, because they were Latino, because I was like, okay, they're part of the LA community. I just felt like, oh, they're with us, not against us. And then just being a part of that conversation, I was like, oh, wow. And it's a big reason why I don't vote down ballot, because I know like everybody ain't for everything. So
can you explain what that means for people who aren't aware with the term voting on down ballot?
Down ballot. So down ballot is voting Democrat or voting Democrat just because they register as such. We know, or we have seen that people switch their voting, their voting party just because they think that they can persuade people or people vote down ballot so they can get those extra votes, but they're not actually implementing policies that benefit that community or the people that vote that way.
And they'll say they're progressive. That's like the new terminology. It's like, I'm progressive. I'm progressive.
But progressive about what?
Right.
Or voting for folks just because they're black or brown.
Right.
I remember when I first started voting, I'd be in there doing tic-tac-toe, like, oh, they sound black. Oh, okay, they got. But in the words of Zora Neale Hurston, all skin folk ain't kin folk.
Right.
And, you gotta, like you said, pay attention to folks' action and not just their words and how they're showing up. And, for example, someone going for mayor, Rick Caruso, 36 years as a Republican, and just a couple weeks before, time to come out and run, he switched over. So it's things like that maybe folks who are not as involved wouldn't pay attention to or wouldn't know. So it's really important to be a critical voter, a voter who's critically thinking. But also, I think a lot of that comes from, us having platforms such as this with Sanctuary of Hope LA is providing a platform that's a discussion where we can reach people where they're at, because it's really important. Because when it comes down to voting, it's just, okay, folks who do show up, they want to get it over with, because it's low-key like the SATs. I'm not even gonna lie. Like, I'm in here having to study for weeks, having to look at different voter guides. I'm like, yo, like, what am I getting at the end of this? And so I really go all out, make sure I'm taping when I'm going to drop off my ballot, even though it's mail-in. I definitely go into a site and look around, make sure folks see me. Like, I am definitely doing my part. But I think also another opportunity that came from the pandemic is that everyone got mail-in ballots. Everybody, who's registered, and if they haven't changed their addresses, and that's something that was a system that just came out, so everyone has the opportunity to get their mail-in ballots, to look at it. So they should be dropping this week. I got mine today. I checked my mail today. Let me say that. So it was in my mailbox. But you have time to look, to actually show up to events, to do your homework and research. Because I didn't turn in my mail-in ballot for the primaries. I think that was the one in June, until the last day. And I saw folks were talking about millennials or talking about these numbers, like, oh, they're not showing up in these early. I was like, I'm holding on to mine because the drama is going to drop. I'm here for the tea and people show their true colors. And then it get real interesting. I stopped watching TV when I start getting involved in politics and policy, because I'm like, the drama is here and this is what is affecting our people. This is, reality is stranger than fiction most of the time. And so I really like held on to mine up until literally the last day and was crossing things off because I wanted to make sure I was doing my homework before I turned it in. And then, then those numbers came in that millennials were showing up, but we just weren't going for the okie doke. I think that was just a consensus. Like, nah, just because I got it on October 10th doesn't mean I'm filling it out and turning it in. I want to actually take my time and, do some homework.
And that's a big point. I'll let you go. I'm just going to be brief. That's a big point because we do our research and Gen Z does their research. We know that they do their research. They cross their eyes. They are social media investigators, right? So it's really important that, like, even with this Herschel Walker thing, right? Like, his son is on it. Like, his son is controversial himself. But he's on it, like, exposing things and making a case for why his father should not be Senate in Georgia, or representing Georgia in the Senate. Also, I like to consider people actually being poll workers. And you mentioned showing up as a millennial and, like, showing up to say, like, this is important to us. This isn't our grandparents' election. This isn't our older people's election. This is affecting us now. It's affecting us in the future. So we have to show up and show our face. It's cute or, like, easy to vote. And I swear at one point in life, they're going to just have us sending an email or doing some poll survey on the internet. But it's important to show your face, show who you are behind the screen when you're voting, because they need to see our Black and brown faces to see that we do care about this. Like, we are just as invested in our democracy as other people are.
And it's even intergenerational. Like, when I started to get involved, I mostly just was in the backgrounds of events, just hearing about different things. And I saw that it was a lot of our more experienced folks who were doing a lot of work. But I feel like there's a gap sometimes between those two. So I see that this is a great intergenerational opportunity, not just amongst millennials and Gen Z, but also for us to reach out to the folks who have been doing this work, who, maybe sometimes we got to challenge them and be like, okay, but it's 2022. But there's so much to learn. There's so much knowledge to be passed down and exchanged. And I've seen that. So I think that's also the beautiful thing about showing up. Because I think, again, when it comes to technology, there's a divide as well with our older folks or folks who are more seasoned, who may not know about Instagram or know how to navigate Instagram and TikTok and all those things. So I think there's so much beauty in us having these intergenerational exchanges and showing up and seeing who's there and who's been doing this work for years. Sometimes there's challenges around, ideas and language that's developing and how we're knowing how to name things and stand up for ourselves. But I've always seen it as I've encountered folks who had open arms and just were willing to download a lot of their information. And that came from me showing up in my community. I grew up in Compton, but I moved around a lot. I'm a former foster youth. So I went to the Valley, and now I'm currently living and working in Venice, but my heart is in Compton. So I'm always trying to make sure I show up in the community that I grew up in, and just whether it's sharing resources or different things like that. Because I think when I talk about meeting people where they're at, I also talk about addressing their needs and then being like, okay, we have resources here. And also here's the opportunity for us to have a meaningful engagement, as opposed to when it comes to elections, folks feel disenfranchised because it's like, oh, vote, 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 and then the election's over, and it's like, all right, Shaniqua, bye. And it's like, well, hey, I'm still here. I still need those resources you were talking about. This person was going to get elected and bring me, but it doesn't necessarily work like that. So I think it's it's a lifelong engagement, and we're really working to build relationships, and it's not just the vote and that's it. It's vote and continue to be involved, vote and hold these elected officials accountable, because once they get in office, that's not the end all be all. Because once you get in office, we could definitely vote you out as well. And I'm all about that. And that's what we're seeing.
Yeah. Well, I wanted to like reset the room a little bit because I know we welcome Jasmine. I don't think we got a chance to do a round of intros, but I haven't gotten a chance to officially meet you. I know Jasmine. Jasmine will have you introduce yourself, but can you let us know what you do? And I know you spoke a little bit about what community you're in.
Well, yeah, thank you for regrounding and regrouping us.
Yeah.
My name is Tanisha Saunders. I work in permanent supportive housing with Venice Community Housing in Venice, California. I'm here representing myself. I'm also a community advocate, former foster youth, activist, just all out loud and proud, former resident of Compton, born and raised in Compton, and Hawthorne too. So I'm really thankful to be invited to this conversation to represent my communities and also join in this talk and hopefully learn from you all as well.
Thank you. Thank you. And Jasmine, you can introduce yourself, your work, and what you do.
Okay, I am Jasmine Kent, also known as Jasmine LeBurn. That's my Instagram handle and all my socials. I am a publicist, integrated communication specialist. I work at the intersection of pop culture and politics, so I'm a fan of both, and I see the intersection of both of them, whether it's the Diddy Rock the Vote campaign or as we saw recently, one of the rappers, I'm drawing a blank on who it was.
Megan.
Oh, it was Trina. It was Trina, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, Trina was doing like a get out the vote thing. But how our celebrities
and Saucy Santana.
Yeah, it was with Saucy Santana.
Mm-hmm.
How our entertainers influence politics, how they show up in Congress when they need something done, like Ashton Kutcher. So I'm really fascinated by that.
Mm-hmm.
And then I also work with lifestyle brands. I'm doing PR and marketing. And I'm also Secretary of National Urban League Young Professionals, and we advocate, thank you guys, yeah, shout out to Urban League. We advocate for equity, equality, and empowerment for Black and brown folks across housing and jobs and all that good stuff.
Wonderful, wonderful. Well, thank you both, and thank you, Christian, for having me. And Christian, did you want to speak a little bit more about why we're here?
Yeah.
What these conversations are going to be about.
Yeah, absolutely. So last week we had a conversation, part one. We had a couple of our millennials that talked about their experiences as voters. This whole series is just really us trying to figure out what the Gen or the millennial. There's this myth that we're not. That you all talked about. Where are the millennials? Are they doing research? Like involved in so like the purpose of trying to create this engagement, political activism, and a beautiful network of beautiful as yourself. I called Jasmine and said, please be on be on the call. Because I know Jasmine's heart, like personality. Same thing with Tanisha. We've done work. She actually graduated with my cousin at Cal State Dominguez. And Sheree go way back like a Cadillac. So it's really trying to put narrative within. Shout out to our executive director and our team, Miss Janet Kelly, as well as all the people that from Compton to Hawthorne. We're in all these different, and we're really trying to expand wide this civic engagement, this electoral power. What does that really mean for us as we just saw yesterday where there's a whole demographic that's calling us monkeys and they're elected.
Yeah.
So where do we go now that being at the forefront? But it's not about political party during these conversations. It's about what is it? It's about integrity. It's about humanity. It's about accountability. And so this is what I want to kind of like our conversation in today. We just figure that all out. And so, Sharik, by all means, thank you again.
Yeah, I'm going to jump in. So, I mean, we all heard the story that got released yesterday about the audio leak. Council President Nuri Martinez had a secret meeting. Someone recorded the conversation, and there was just a lot of horrible racial epithets that were spoken, that the public got to hear in regards to another, correct me if I'm wrong, Christian, another council member's adopted son who is Black. And it was just very negative, and it was wrong across the board, including what she was saying, people laughing, people engaging, and honestly excusing the behavior. She did issue an apology, but some people think that that's not enough, and a lot of people think that all of those people who were in the room who, you know, inevitably excused it, as well as her, should be forced to sit down. Karen Bass, who, as most of us, all of us should know, who's running for mayor, did put out a statement on her Twitter saying that they should be held accountable as well, and apologizing to the young man that they were having the conversation about, because it was really horrible. So I immediately, for me, this kind of just took me back to the 1990s when we were having all of these different race wars and race riots. I'm from Oakland. I wasn't here in Los Angeles, but I heard about it happening here. I know that we've had our own issues up in the Bay. And I know that the Black and brown community, we try to, you know, save face and you know, put on the face of equity and unity. But I thought that this was just a horrible blow for so many reasons, because what we don't want is to dismantle that unity. But what do you guys think overall in regards to the development that came out about, you know, these particular council members of Latino descent? Do you think this is going to be extremely detrimental for everyone, or is it just for them?
I think it's them speaking for themselves. I think I've had a lot of my Latinx folks who actually hit me up. One person, before I even knew it was a developing story, was like, she sent me the audio. She's a Latinx woman. She's like, I grew up with this woman. You know, I don't stand by this, and this is ridiculous. She was not just talking about African Americans. She was talking about, you know, Oaxacan, Koreans, indigenous folks, as we're talking about Indigenous Peoples Day. So it just went through racism on so many intersectional levels. But for me, as someone who, you know, came from the inner city, grew up in the inner city, and has had policy actually affecting me and affecting us, I feel like this, excuse my language, this shit is so validating because it shows in the policies we've seen come through. So a lot of times when I've been, you know, working in political and policy spaces, I'm like, why can't we say, you know, Black? Why can't we, you know, identify Black in these policies? If we talk about redlining, if we could track the racist history that has led to disproportionate outcomes of us experiencing homelessness, of mass incarceration and all this, well, why can't we create policies that then address specifically Black people in these, you know, racist history? And people's like, oh, you know, we can't explicitly say that. You know, I worked for the Los Angeles Homeless Services Authority, because my main thing is, why is it that Black people represent 8% of LA County, but we're about 40% of those experiencing homelessness? This is violence to me. So when I hear folks being exposed for saying things like this, it tracks. It tracks in our policies. It tracks in how folks show up. So for me, I don't think it'll create a bigger divide. I think it's exposing reality. A lot of anti-Blackness exists within the Latinx community. A lot of anti-Blackness exists within the Black community. Anti-Blackness is around us and running rampant. So I think it's an opportunity for us to continue a conversation, hold folks accountable, and move forward. And for us not to shy away from saying things as Black. We need policies that address Black folks and go to the fine tune of things. Like, it's not bad for us to ask for reparations. It's not bad for us to say Black Lives Matter when we have the evidence smacking us dead in the face, when we have our folks dying out in the street, when we have our folks incarcerated, when we have our children getting kicked out of schools. But we have to tiptoe around our Blackness when we talk about policies and politics, and it's just not fair for me. And so for this to come out, I think it's only exposing the truth that could be pointed out in so many different rooms. It's just, they're not sorry they said it, they're sorry that they got caught. And if we look at policies and we want to hold people accountable in political spaces, then we have to be unapologetic in our Blackness and unapologetic in how we show up. Because when we show up for Black people, all people across the board, we're lifting up folks because we're talking about equity, and we're stopping these streams where they're at. But it's looked at as, oh, we can't say that, we can't address that, and for me, it makes me mad as hell. It makes me mad as hell. So I actually did a fellowship in Nuri Martinez's office in 2018, and there's just so much drama going through the LA City Hall. There's so much corruption being pointed out every year, every day. So for me, it's just another reason for us to continue to stay vigilant, continue to stay involved, and continue putting our foot on the gas and holding people accountable, and not being afraid to express our Blackness and have it be put out in layman's terms, because what's coming out of their mouth is showing up in our streets. When we got to say Black Lives Matter, at every political standpoint, when we're talking about Black women dying in hospitals giving birth, and it's 2022, you know, mass incarceration, but we don't want to give reparations for slavery. We still have slavery technically. I can go on for hours, but for me, you know, it's just validating, unfortunately, to see this come out.
Yeah, and it's like we've been saying it, you know, and then if we make mention of it, then we're the ones that are pulling the race card. And how can you pull the race card? They're Latino, they're Latinx, we're one and the same. It's about BIPOC, right? It's this whole BIPOC thing,
and the erasure of our Black.
Right. So I totally agree with you. I don't think there should be some sort of race rioting or war, but I think that there's definitely something to be said about what they really do think and say about us. And what's funny about this is that it was so classless. Like the conversation and the comments that they were making were just goofy. They were silly. It had no weight. It had no intellectual prowess about it whatsoever. Not that you can, but the fact that it was calling someone a monkey, like what, it's 2022, you guys. Like that's how low we are. Go ahead, Jasmine.
The meat of the conversation was about redistricting, right? And then that was just a sidebar conversation that she wants to like be funny. And she said like, oh, I was frustrated and speaking out of turn. No, you weren't. You were trying to be funny on the side. So say it with your chest, first of all. So like that pissed me off. But the whole conversation is about redistricting. And that is the most important issue, because I don't know if it's this election or if it was the primaries. I get confused sometimes. I got a lot on my plate. But even in Inglewood and Compton and like mid-city around that USC area is important by redistricting because the assets that are in this city. So a big reason why they were having this conversation was about making sure certain people get certain assets so that they can keep their wealth, so that they can tax and have a renter's market or a landlord's market, so that renters can still pay these high ass rents and basically not be able to accumulate wealth and basically get out of the situations, or you know, lift themselves by their bootstraps, as they like to say. So it's really frustrating to hear like this conversation by a person of color who's supposed to be for people of color, making these anti-Black, anti-Latino remarks in the scope of things.
Yeah.
I mean, I think it's just so vile. Like the whole conversation was vile that we heard. We only got bits and pieces, so I would love to know what the whole conversation was. But it's very vile to me. And, you know, I think she stepped down as president of the city council, but I think she should step down, and the whole people in that conversation should step down immediately, effectively. I looked at my voter registration information guide today. I need to look through it a little more deeper, but I don't think any of them are on the ballot. But I think there needs to be a special election, because we've seen, and this was last year, right? The conversation was last year. So we've seen that they're making policies, like you said, Tanisha, like they're making policies that are affecting us, that are against our betterment, that is splitting races and people of color. We're already the minority, right? Like you're splitting us and you're pitting us against each other already. So it feels like it's going to be no solution. It feels like we're fighting so many, like we're fighting. And the thing is, it's like Black people, we're not united. Like it's sad, but like we're not united as a front in general, right? So if we are fighting MAGA, we're fighting Latinx, we're fighting all these fronts, and we can't even keep ourselves together, it just feels like there's, and I don't want to say it like this, but it feels like it's no, I hate to use the word, but it feels like it's no hope. It feels like we are not ever going to cross the finish line and like get to where we need to be because we're all fighting against each other and fighting ourselves.
Yeah, definitely.
And this is where the Gen Zers and millennials can coordinate to be
Yeah.
able to be that sense of hope, right? Because you have politicians and political folks that have unfortunately fell victim to, selling out. They have gotten their fair share of assets or whatever through that stuff. I'm not going to name any names, but you can tell that the political world has allowed to get contracts and get wealth of some type of nature. But however, Gen Zers and millennials, from what I've been seeing, like yourselves, like we're not trying to be politically savvy. We just want ours, which is a fair share, which is reparations, reconciliation, for all these different things, economic wealth. Like, there's no reason why there are people that are homeless, they're out surfing, they're still getting incarcerated. We're getting brutalized by the police. Like all these different factors. And I hear you, Jasmine, because that's what I'm thinking too. Like, where is that sense of hope? Like even during the historical times with Martin Luther King and Malcolm X, it seems like it was divided, but they actually were preaching the same message. They were preaching right? So how do we unify this in 2022 and we still are seeing the same factors like in today's time frame? Like it's kind of it's sad, but I want to say optimistic because we are on the front lines. You're part of Urban League, so you're in those conversations. Like, hey, let's hope. Sharik, same thing at Paramount. Tanisha, just we are that sense of hope. I just want everyone that joins and sees this call, like, think about those ways of us addressing, anti-blackness, white supremacy. People are afraid of us saying white supremacists. Like, I know the Antelope Valley is full of white supremacists, but for some reason, black people don't like me saying that. They're like, you should calm down. Like, it's like, why? It's true.
Right.
It's right.
But
Even within the last year with the challenges that we face with the Asian community and the idea of the model minority, so to speak, it's all a part of what you're saying is white colonialism within the mind, and just feeling that we have to appease to that in order to get ahead, and we have to step on top of each other in order to get ahead. There's something to say there, and I agree, we need to call a spade a spade. It's white supremacy, and it's an infectious disease, and we got to come together. Like, we literally have to come together. What they won't tell you is that the Green Berets and the Black Panthers actually work together. The Rainbow Coalition, they actually work together. They didn't talk about that when we were children. That's something that people are just now discovering, is how many of these different racial groups and community groups actually knew that they had to come together, and they knew that somehow if they were going to be disbanded, that it was going to be from within. And that's what we have to remember as we move forward, and not to try to have these tough conversations and hold each other accountable at the same time.
And that's the thing, right? It's a force. If we really stick together and remove our individualism, and just work as group and group economics, if you will, we work together to make the change to fight white supremacy. I was watching something today, and it's so funny. They were saying that it's offensive to call someone white. Well, why is that? Why can't I call you white? That's what you are. Like, I don't get, like, it's like, and this is kind of off topic. It's kind of off topic, but it's like,
it's not.
They want to be oppressed so bad, and they want to feel our fight so bad, but they can't because they still have power and dominion over the Constitution and the government. So it just doesn't make sense to me. So she was upset about being called white, and then it was another thing. They were like, "Oh, African Americans." And it feels like that's the proper term, right? To say African Americans. Well, call me black. Like, I don't give. Call me black. Call me African American. Just don't call me NIGGA. But it's just these dynamics and the subtleness of, like, cancel culture and it's just all these like little terms that we get distracted by, that it's like it's not getting to the meat of what we really need to deal with. And I would just like to see us, all these organizations, come together and like sit down, figure out how we're going to fight this, because it's coming back up and it's boiling and we're tipping over the pot at this point. Where we got to figure something out. Like my grandmother, you know, I'll talk about my grandmother so much. My grandmother is 94. She says this is the worst she's seen. And I don't know if it's because of social media, but for a 94-year-old woman to say this is the worst she's seen in America, and my grandma, she watches the news and she has an iPhone, so she like gets the news, all that good stuff. But for her to say that, it's kind of troubling.
I think it's a reality of how far we've come. Like there's some controversial like arguments that some folks said, you know, I think it was actually better when we were segregated. And I think what they were getting to the meat of is that we as communities were, you know, in the same school supporting one another. But then when our community started to integrate, they started to divest from these same communities. And so we still to this day have our communities that are divested from. And I feel like what your grandmother may be sharing and highlighting is not only a testament to social media and how accessible we have things, but how like we don't really have communities where you can go to the, you know, in the 90s, I could stay out to the street lights came on and I had at least 5 people on my block who my family 100%. Knew their first and their last name. And, you know, we could stay out over their house if something happened. But 100%. There is this divide that I think that you were talking to, talking about collectivism. I believe in collectivism, but I don't think that we all necessarily have to align in every single standpoint, because we have over 100 organizations that have similar goals. Like the end goal is justice, but we're fighting, you know, domestic violence. We're fighting foster care. We're fighting, you know, for a transformation of the child welfare system and different things like that. And I think sometimes when we say unity, folks think like, oh, we all have to be on one accord and one page, when there's so much diversity within us. If we're speaking about Black folks, we're not a monolith. So I think, you know, we have to build coalition building is what you're speaking of. And it's so powerful because it's like, okay, we ain't got to exactly agree with what Jan gonna say, but Jan got to be on code. Because I look at other folks in their political parties and I'm like, well, they're going to be on code. They're going to be on the wrong code. But guess what? Everybody going to be on the same line and on the same number to a certain standpoint. And it's like, you know, how do you have that? Whether it's, you know, blind ignorance, I think there's something to be said about that. And I think there has to be a collaboration between our generations, what your grandmother came from, because there's so much power in that. And I think what older generations were coming from were from survival. Your grandma just didn't get to 94 without her wits, you know what I'm saying? Without her survival, without her community, without her base. And she's got so much knowledge and so much power in that. And, you know, our folks are out here, you know, every day I look online and I see someone in their 40s, 50s, and 30s that are passing away. And it all boils down to racism, and it's like in the violence of it all. So for me, I just don't have the patience. Like I'm getting more involved and more active, but I don't have the patience to talk to people and defend my Blackness anymore. And if you're not with me, I literally will just stare at you blank in the face. And I'm in a predominantly white community, and I'm just like, not today, sis. Like, I'm gonna smile, and that's about it, because you're willfully being ignorant. When Google is free, you know what I'm saying? Like, you can get online and Google what you're trying to have me explain and, you know, gaslight me into having to defend my experiences, when it's really just like, you ain't with it, you know, because I think we do have to have allies and all those things, but some folks just want to talk, but it's like, we out here dying. We're the ones that are out here on the lines, and Black women are the ones who are continuously showing up, but we're deemed as angry. We're deemed as, you know, we got to be upholding people's campaign, but we ain't leading in so many different ways. So I think there has to be a marrying of the generations, and I want to, learn how to use TikTok. So I definitely got to get me some Gen Z friends, because
That's
I
one of
feel
the things
like
we talked about for sure. Yeah,
I
I want
think
to
Gen Z
circle it
is
back.
so bold.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, I
they're
want to
in your
circle it back to
face.
that because we had an amazing conversation with some Gen Zers yesterday. Opened up my eyes, Christian. I think you might have had an aha moment as well. And so, how do we? This is a full circle moment. How do we take yesterday's news and associate it with the power of our vote, and then empower Gen Z with that? Because I feel as though there could be a shift, especially here in Los Angeles County. This is home. This hit us close. This wasn't in the Bible Belt. This was right here, so how do we use that, and how do we empower ourselves and let others know that, hey, this is why voting matters? Where do you see the connection in that? Either of you, Jasmine, or whichever one wants to answer.
First, I'll go first.
Go for
You
it.
go first. You go first. I got it. That's a deep question.
I think it's a relevant and very necessary question. Peers are really caught up in media, video games. Not everyone, but more so, it's more techie, right? And so I'm sure that everyone. I was at Lawrence's house, and on his alarm clock it literally pulled up, the incident of what was going on signing. And
Mm,
so information is becoming so readily available to them to where it should activate our within them. What I'm not seeing is that they want to be activists in a way or organizers in a way. It's like, well, ancestors, it's okay. Or, my mama's doing it. We have to be actively in with our young folks and our Gen Z. Where I'm thinking is like thinking about leadership development. How do we create the next generation of activists or and to make them really want to learn and honor the history? So much history that has happened. We could talk about blood, sweat, and tears all day. Die for it. Is that relevant? How do we make that relevant in today's time? And I think that that's a little bit of a disconnect because CRT, that's a whole other conversation, is being wiped out of our schools.
mm,
Trying to talk about history, blah. So it's how do we do engage with the Gen Zers? And this is what we're doing through these platforms. Hope that people merge over to TikTok or something, but just really thinking about like engaging through another lens of social media, giving different talks, giving different webinars, and really thinking about, even mentorship. Like last week we had two mentees that we can also tie in. So, there's different avenues. I think I hit the question. If I did, is there something that I'm missing on it?
no, you hit it on the nail on the head. I feel as though, like we spoke about last week, we live in a time of sensationalism.
Yeah.
Everybody wants instant gratification and sensationalism, and I'm like, that's some sensational news that came out yesterday.
Yeah.
And this is, I think, exposing this and also leading them down the rabbit hole, like Jasmine said, how this ties in to redistricting. And
Yeah.
how does that affect us? How do the mindset of these people who are creating these districts and doing these redistricting, how does that in the long run affect us? And how does it affect our Gen Z and our youth?
Okay, before Jasmine goes, Jasmine, you hit it on the nail about redistricting. We're forgetting that was the point of the conversation, which is another violation of the Brown Act, right? So elected officials are not supposed to be doing this, right? And so this is what we have to push folks with integrity, our Gen Zers that are saying, you know what, I'm not about, I'm really trying to be about the people. The people are the ones that are asking for the resignation. Some of these elected officials ain't even talked about it yet. So us on here, we're talking about the incident, or and I'm talking about it. There's a protest happening tomorrow at City Hall. If you want to get involved, I'll talk about it later. But this is where we're able to tap in and do that, right? I'll shut up. All right, Jasmine. Sorry, I had to tag team because you were so right about that redistricting.
Yeah.
I think so. One, we're in Gen Z millennials, young millennials, and maybe middle millennials love outrage culture. We love outrage culture. We love the headlines. We love any sensationalism. We talked about that, right? I think it gets to the point where we can't just look at it and talk about it. We have to be about it, right? And their platforms, and I was trying to think of them. One, I believe, and I'm probably getting it wrong, but it's Mobilize, and that's the one where you can create petitions and then you sign your name and da da da. Well, the problem with that is they want to email you all the time. After you put your information in, they want to email you about things you don't care about, or they email you about willy-nilly. So those petitions actually work, and they get in the hands and they go to legislators. Once those letters go in, then it takes someone to hold those legislators accountable for the letters they get. So it's a whole cycle that we have to figure out how we're going to attack and organize and make sure we hold these people accountable. And I think that's kind of the gap in our conversations, is how do we hold them accountable? So we need to figure that out as a community. I don't have the answers. And then there's another one called Action Act that does the same thing. So I think really the bottom line is that we can talk about it on social media, we can spread the word, but it's really about making sure we figure out ways to hold them accountable and say, like, we the people are saying XYZ. Back in the day when the founding fathers, it was a smaller community. They had town halls, they had villages where they can go together and speak their truth, and it'd be a solid vote. Now we have billions of people or millions of people who are commenting on the same thing. We're all saying the same things, but unless the money talks, right? Like, unless we have the money to influence something, it's not going to get done. We can fight, like the abortion situation. Like, who the hell don't want abortion rights? I mean, I don't know what y'all think, but like, who doesn't want pro-choice? I want to make decisions for my body.
Yeah, and I think that's the thing too. Like I said, some of us are, I think, a little bit spoiled because we're on the two coasts, and you know, we come from very diverse, I put that in air quotes, communities. And I was watching Jon Stewart the other night. You guys should check out his show because it's really good. But he was talking about, in reference to the abortion rights. He was like, you know, just some people, you're not going to convince them that abortion isn't murder. You're just not going to convince them of that. So what are ways that we can communicate and find some sort of middle ground in order to make this more of a legislative issue rather than a beliefs issue? What's fair issue rather than this is my religion, this is what I believe in? Because, you know, there's supposed to be a separation between church and state. That's what we're founded upon. Am I right or am I wrong? You know, so there's supposed to be, and I put that in air quotes as well. So it's like, how do we meet people where they're at? And we were having a conversation with the Gen Zers yesterday. I asked them, like, how do you feel about the, you know, the Saucy Santanas and Trina voting song? How do you feel about Joe Biden having a conversation with Cardi B? How do you feel about Kamala Harris going on to the Breakfast Club? Do you feel like this is poaching? Do you feel like this is effective? Or do you feel as though it's just straight up corny? And the feedback that we got is that they need to actually go into these communities and grab these young folks and have them be the ones that go out and connect with their fellow Gen Zers, and have them be the ones to help you strategize on the best ways to communicate and make it relatable to them, because that's really all it has to be. It's supposed to be relatable. I have to find where I am in this issue and how it's going to affect me, my mama, my sisters, my cousins, and then I may be passionate about it. But if I don't have that relatability factor, you're going to miss me. So I think that's,
and then look at who the players are, right? Who the characters are. It's Trina and Saucy Santana talking about vote, get the vote out. But then you have Killer Mike advocating for Brian Kemp. You have Kanye saying anti-Semitic comments. So you gotta look at the players. Like, these are all Black people, right? You gotta look at the players. You gotta look at who they're influencing, who their target audience is, who their secondary audience is, who was loyal and built their platforms, and see like what they're saying and how they're saying it and what they stand for. And I think that's very important when you look at celebrities in the movement.
I think it's also important to empower Gen Z, similar to what y'all were saying, how it should be them going out and talking to other Gen Z, because
we lost her. Well,
But I agree, and
but
I
piggyback on her point, I want to say, as a millennial, did you guys ever sometimes feel like the baby boomers and the Gen Xers was kind of like hating on us a little bit, like, you know, kind of pushing us down and making us feel like we were complainers? And I don't feel like we were empowered really by them. I feel as though like baby boomers talk crap, like we're lazy, we like avocado toast, and
I
you know.
never worry about that when it comes to politics because I feel like they know they need our vote.
Yeah.
I do feel like they try to, like we were talking about with the Killer Mike and the Kanye and all these other people, they try to like sweep stuff and say like, oh, you should vote Democrat just because they're Democrat. You should vote this way just because they're this way. Like,
Mm-hmm.
no, we are more educated. We have minds. We can see through the glass, the rose-colored lenses. We can make decisions based on what the facts are. So
Yeah.
I think that's more important than, and I think that's how they kind of want to persuade us. Versus, and I was in a lot of community organizations growing up, so I think that's my individual perspective.
Yeah.
Um,
Wow,
versus,
the reason why I say that too, and I'm gonna put it back to you because I know you were making a point before we lost you. The reason why I say that is I think it's important that we're having these conversations because we can empower the next generation versus how they used to treat us. I would say I used to feel like I said, boomers used to talk about us bad. They probably still do, and I think us coming together and empowering Gen Z and saying, hey, you have power. Hey, we take your thoughts and concerns into consideration. What are your thoughts and concerns? Let us know. I think that can make a huge difference. And I think that's part of the disconnect that we're maybe experiencing today. But what were you saying before we lost you, Tiffany? I'm sorry. Tanisha, I'm sorry.
Tanisha,
Somebody popped up on
I'm
my screen.
sorry. I
Sorry.
was trying to press something and kicked myself out. I'm sorry. I think y'all have mentioned it. It's just listening to Gen Z and having Gen Z lead and empowering them and creating environments where they can have these platforms, where they can have these conversations at the community level. I've seen the power of high school students and my activism with Black Lives Matter, looking at the Students Deserve movement, and that is a student-led movement, and just seeing, you know, how powerful their voices are and having their perspectives, because I think it's one thing for us to look at situations and have our perspectives, but to have it come from their minds and their voices and their perspectives, it's so powerful because they're able to see things from their lens that we may be missing out on, and they're able to name opportunities and highlight opportunities. So how are we having a reciprocal relationship with Gen Z and inviting them in? And again, what I was talking about, the intergenerational opportunities to learn. It's both ways. So how are we giving them platforms and supporting their platforms? Maybe they already have something going that we don't know about. Because social media is a beast. I'm scared of Twitter and TikTok. After Instagram and Facebook, I'm like, I'm signing out, y'all. Auntie gotta go to bed. I just can't keep up. So really, how are we connecting with these folks and empowering them is what it's really about, is what I'm interested in,
Mm-hmm.
because I can speak for myself and I can't even speak for all millennials.
Do you feel like it's
I
our
come from my
responsibility?
perspective. I think it's a shared responsibility. It's a
Mm-hmm.
collective. We can't take it all on. I think if we're able to name these things, like, you know, we're reaching back and we're also reaching forward at the older generation, at our different generations, because we're still millennials and we're still learning and growing ourselves. And one thing that I've learned trying to get into political and policy spaces is there's a lot of gatekeeping. Unfortunately, there are people who are in, and if you don't know somebody, then you can't get through the front door, and I'm coming through the window. Like, hey, you didn't let me in. And I saw there was a vent open over here. You didn't know I was coming. That's kind of like been my strategy, because again, I'm from Compton and we didn't have a lot of resources growing up, and we didn't have a lot of this language to name. And a lot of the folks that I grew up with are still dealing with these challenges, and we're experiencing homelessness, or we're in relationships we shouldn't be in because we think it's stability. And you know, we're still out here surviving in our
Yeah.
various ways, and we're burdened so much so that I look around in my timeline and I'm like, damn, I remember when I was ignorant and it was fun. Ignorance is bliss,
Okay.
yo. It is bliss, because my friends keep telling me stop talking about climate change. My boyfriend was like, I'm not talking to you about the weather no more. And I was like, well, it's
and
real. I miss the days where I was ignorant and I didn't have to worry about it. And I'm like, I don't condemn folks for not wanting to have these conversations, because they're very difficult conversations to have when we're not coming with solutions. When, when we still got to show up to our 40, 50-hour work week and worry about why we got to pay 70% of our income on rent. And we can't necessarily get involved in these conversations and show up in the streets because we got to take care of our families. And so I'm really focused on how to build and meet people where they're at, and just understanding the different dynamics. And I think it's, opportunities for us to learn from folks who didn't have as much as us back in the day, but they still made it through. Whereas we, have more access to material or have more access to social, but it feels like we're just trying to stay afloat here. Where it's like, well, y'all didn't, but they have more community. They have more resources. They had, rent parties. They had come together, and it's about building community and meeting folks where they're at, and then from there
Shout out to
building
the
and
rent party, because
organizing.
I want to have a rent party. However, I wanted to touch on, because you mentioned climate change. I think another thing with Gen Z is that their issues are our issues. Our issues aren't our grandparents, or our parents' issues. Our parents' issues are our grandparents' issues. So I think that's also the divide in a lot of things. Climate change is important across the board. Police brutality is important. But it's those little things that we don't really, or people in general, don't really realize, like economics, or like home security and like water. The things we take advantage because we're privileged. Everyone has their privileges, everyone has their lack of privileges. But those things that we take advantage of that other people don't have, and we advocate for things that we don't even know we should be advocating for, I think it's a big gap. And so I would love to see the next 2 years, because we have the big election in 2 years, we take time to educate on the smaller issues and the bigger issues. Climate change is a universal issue that everyone worries about. Like, white people worry about that, right? What are those issues that only serve Black people? What are those issues? And don't get me wrong, climate change affects Black people more than it does white people. Most cities are, the Black communities are built around the power plants and pollution areas, right? So it's going to affect us way more than a hurricane coming in and flooding a city. Like, those are 1 in a million events. But every day we get hit by pollution when we are living in Black communities. So it's definitely an issue. It's just, how do we solve that issue? How do we use better, and I'm not an expert at this, I'm going to say use better coal, or eliminate coal. Things like water. We saw Flint, we saw Mississippi, and I think in Baltimore, in my, it's not my city, but in my neighbor in Baltimore, how they all don't have clean water in 2022. What is the solution? Because you're privatizing water, and we're bottling water, and now we have to pay $3 a bottle. Like, that doesn't make sense. So it's just like little issues that I think we need to all, like these coalitions that we talked about earlier, we need to figure out ways to prioritize issues that affect our communities at a greater level, that aren't the headlines and aren't those like splashy issues.
Yeah.
We need to get deep and dirty and say, these are affecting Black people, not people of color, Black people.
Yeah, definitely. Well, I know we're out of time, because we've hit the hour before Instagram kicks us off. But I just wanted to thank you, ladies, and thank you, Christian, for having me. And
Thank
then
you.
just really quickly, where can people find you? I'll start with you, Tanisha, and then we'll go clockwise, or however you want to do it.
Y'all can find me on Instagram and Facebook. My Instagram, I'll put it in the comment box. But I'm mostly on Instagram and Facebook. And if y'all want to connect with me on permanent supportive housing and affordable housing, we can connect on those issues as well. I'm supporting Yes on Measure ULA, United to House LA, which is a measure that's going to be on the Los Angeles City ballot.
Awesome.
That
and
is
Jasmine?
on the ballot.
Easiest way is on Instagram. If you tap that little carrot, the bottom carrot at the top of the screen, I think you'll be able to find all of our Instagrams. Mine is Jasmine2_Laverne. I have a podcast. I did 2 episodes. I'm going to do my 3rd this weekend on pop culture and politics. So stay tuned for that. Follow me. And then I also have a page there. It's BTW by Jasmine Laverne, I think. Or it's by The Weekend Pod, actually. It's in my bio because I change it all the time. And then I'm on Twitter, Jasmine1_Laverne. It's private, so unless you have a real page, I'm not following you back. I'm not accepting you. And then I have my Facebook, which is also Jasmine, or it's Jasmine Laverne and Company for my PR brand. So that's me, Jasmine_Laverne on Instagram is the easiest way to get in contact.
And also tap in with the Urban League, young professionals.
100%. And I can give you any advice. We have, I think, 52 chapters around the country. Whatever the closest city you're in, just let me know, and I will lead you to the right person to get involved. We do amazing work. It's a volunteer group, and I'm really proud of my work with them, and I'm very proud of all the work we've accomplished. It's a great leadership development program and opportunities available to be civically engaged. So I'm here to help you navigate that.
Awesome. And I'll go, and then Christian, you can close us out. I'm Sharique LeMay. I am a producer, and I am here in Los Angeles, and I'm here to spread knowledge and a wealth of knowledge. And if you guys ever need me, let me know. And yeah, thanks you for having me. We're going to be here every Monday, 6:30, same time. And then I'll throw it to you, Christian.
Absolutely. So y'all forgive me because I'm not at my house and someone stole my laptop, so I just feel all out of place now. It's been a long weekend. Anyways, please join us next Monday. We're continually gonna do this. Our voice into Sanctuary of Hope LA. Everyone that has joined us, we are very trying to target young Black and millennial community, of course, but millennial voters being civically engaged and talking about the issues from a nonpartisan perspective. We just want people to be educated for the day. And I will say this: tomorrow there will be a press conference. Everyone's showing up at LA City Council tomorrow. There's a press conference happening at 8 a.m. If you are free, by go out there and go be civically and go speak up, And so I want to say thank you so much, Jasmine. Thank you so much, Tanisha. Thank you so much, Sharique, for joining us for part 2. I love y'all. I think Sanctuary of Hope loves y'all. And let's keep every aspect of your life, all right?
All right, God bless y'all.
God bless.